And Russ, I'm assuming our attendees do show up live as they enter, right?
Yes, we'll see the
Okay.
numbers.
Have you had any? Good.
Welcome to the Virtual College Fair. Appreciate you joining us. As people come into the room, I'll go through some housekeeping announcements, and you can see them on your screen. You can use the Q&A button at any time to ask questions to our presenters. Your camera and microphones are off, so the panelists cannot see or hear you. So just get comfortable. You can be as comfortable as you need to be, and just, you can focus on all the great information that's going to be presented here. This is just one of many different sessions happening, so be sure to sign up for additional ones where you signed up for this one. And this presentation is being recorded and will be available within about a week at the same website where you registered. Again, use the Q&A button to ask questions to our presenters at any time. And again, thank you for joining us. That's the housekeeping stuff. I will get out of the way and allow our experts to present. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, my name is Kiara, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an assistant director of admissions at Hampshire College. I'm also a recent graduate. I graduated this spring, so hopefully I'll be able to answer questions from multiple perspectives.
And good afternoon. My name is Bernadette Burke. I am also an assistant director of admissions at Hampshire College. I've been at Hampshire for about a year and have had a lot of other connections to the college. And we're going to just go ahead and dive right in. I may have forgotten to say I also use she, her pronouns. I'm sorry that I forgot that. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see a little bit of Hampshire's divisional system. Kiara, do I have the right screen up there? Super. So Hampshire actually is a little bit different than some colleges. Obviously, you know that because you're here through Colleges That Change Lives. So I'm going to point out a few things about Hampshire. Yes.
It changed.
It changed. Thank you.
There you go.
All right. Step back.
Yes.
All right. Sorry about that. So Hampshire actually does something a little bit different than some colleges. We have what we call the divisional system. And the divisional system is broken into 3 parts, and it is your first year is your Division 1, second and third year are Div 2, and then Division 3 is your 4th year. Something about Hampshire that we like to bring up most often is that many of our concentrations are completely student directed. So you can choose a major and even combine majors in a way. We don't actually use the phrase major, but I use that for students who are more common. They're used to that phrasing. We have a very strong advising system, and our faculties are very, very invested in advising. Every faculty is an advisor. It's a very scaffolded support system. So in the beginning, we give you much more support in getting used to Hampshire's ways. And then as you move forward through the divisional system, you get to decide how much support you're looking for from your advisors. And you can work with them to decide whether you're meeting with them weekly, monthly, or just a few times through the semester. We have all students do an end of year portfolio for every part of their division. So Division 1, you'll do a portfolio. Division 2 is a 2-year combined portfolio. And then Division 3 is the big and exciting portfolio or project. One of the things that Hampshire has done recently has been to redevelop our academic system so that we are utilizing something that we call learning collaboratives rather than schools. And the learning collaboratives are environments and change, media and technology, time and narrative, and in/justice. So justice and injustice, and how do we look at items throughout the world under those 4 lenses. So we can talk a little bit more about those later, but right now I'm going to dive into the div system so that we make sure we cover the most important info. For the division system, when we start in Division 1, you only are required to take 2 classes during your first year. That means you get to choose up to 5 electives, rather than having requirements that are dictated to you, you can dive in at any of our early level classes, and it doesn't matter whether it is under what you consider your chosen concentration or if it's in another area. First year seminars are the only requirements, as I said, and those are taught with multiple faculty so that you'll be looking at solving big world problems through multiple lenses. Most of our first year seminars are taught by upwards of 4 professors. And to give an example, if you're looking at something through the environments and change, you might have someone who is speaking about environments and change through the scientific perspective. Someone else might be talking about it through the economic perspective. Someone else might be talking about it through appropriate technology, rather than what's happening in the global environment, but how we solve that. And that's just one of many examples about the way our programs are multifaceted, multi-dimensional. We actually consider it transdisciplinary, is the phrase that we use on our campus. The only requirements we have of you other than that during the first year is that you are required to do something that we call campus engaged learning, also known as get out of your dorm room, do something fun on campus. It can mean anything from joining a club to helping a Division III student. One of the things that we're now requiring is that part of it is based in community education in some way or another, whether it's joining something that has cultural awareness locally, awareness of self and others, communicating across differences, whether that's neurodiversity in education or cultural diversities, and then also really that you are open to interacting and engaging with multiple cultural perspectives. And then there's 20 hours where you get to choose what you want. So the entire campus engaged learning is only 40 hours through the entire year. Not really hard to meet. Most of our students actually meet it by about the end of October, to be honest. You are assigned an advisor your first year. You're welcome to choose another, but generally it is the advisor that is matched up with your first year seminar. So it's a great way to become familiar with them. They're your professor as well as your advisor, and it really creates a very close working collaborative. At the throughout your first year, the one other aspect that is different than some schools is that we use narrative evaluations rather than using grade letter grades. So by not having letter grades, you're actually removing the competition between students, and you are taking on self-reflection. So our learning is really about ownership. What can you do with it? How are you interacting with it? And how do you become a more effective, efficient, and broader learner? And so within that, your narrative evaluation will often have areas that you're doing very well, and then areas that you can continue to improve on, even if they're the same places that you do very well. Your transcript becomes a mini book, and it is incredibly helpful for future employers as well as graduate school, because they get to know you as a full person rather than just a few letters or grades. You're not a number to us, neither is your evaluation, and that's something we take very seriously. We can go further into that if folks have questions later, but I am going to move us on because we don't have a lot of time and I tend to be too much of a talker when I get into it. So what I'd like to do is say one last thing about Division I, and then I'm going to turn it over to Kiara, and she'll fill in any of the blanks that I missed in Div 1. The last thing that you do during your Divisional I system, your Division I year, is that you work with your advisor to develop a portfolio, and that's all of the meaningful work that you have done throughout the year. It is your narrative evaluations, your self-evaluations, and some of the most important projects or papers that you've written. And that becomes a whole retrospective of what you have done for the year, and often you write something about that as a singular, cohesive learning environment for yourself. Kiara, what did I miss during my Div 1 presentation?
Not much. That was a really great way to explain Div 1. I think one thing that I would say is that Div 1 is really the year you learn how to learn at Hampshire because our model is so different and we get prospective students from all over the place with all different learning backgrounds, with all different sets of knowledge. It allows us to kind of collect and find ways to engage with the Hampshire system so that you're successful for years to come. So with that in mind, after you have done your Div 1 portfolio and you've passed, you move on to Div 2. So your Div 2 is your second and third year. I like to use this as a way to talk about how you're going to start gathering and specifying, because a lot of this time is spent just taking a lot of courses, as many courses as possible, to really add to what it is that you're studying and your concentration, and start to specify what is it that you're studying at Hampshire, because you can be studying many different areas of study and transdisciplinary. So then how do we kind of hone that in so that your Div 3 project can be really specified? So like in Div 1, we talked about how advising at Hampshire is really important. So your Div 2, you decide on 2 advisors. So instead of Div 1 where you were assigned an advisor, in Div 2 you get to pick. And some people keep their Div 1 advisor and some decide to change them, some keep one and add one. It really depends on who you've connected with, who you've networked with. And again, in Div 1, you really spend time on learning how to make those network connections between professors. Other students who are interested in things that you're interested in might tell you, hey, there's a really great professor who would be who you would work really well with. So that's something to keep in mind, because those people will then help you to sign a Division 2 contract. So at the beginning of your year, because Hampshire has not a loose structure, but a structure that you design, you need time to kind of prep that and design that so that you can achieve what is your goal for that year or those 2 years. So in Div 2, you set up a contract with your advisors, really just talking about all the classes that you are interested in, some areas that you want to learn, some questions that you're really interested in, just because overall at Hampshire, you're really driving your education through questions that interest you. So this is also the years that we invite students to do their study abroad, their independent research, field studies, because Hampshire is really about learning wherever you can learn. Division 2 is when we really open up your portfolios at the end of the year to include everything and anything in between classrooms, right? So it's not just what's happening, not just the learning that's happening in the classrooms, but also what's happening outside the classrooms. What could be on your study abroad? You could be home during Jan term, which is the winter intersession, and you could be volunteering. And we like to really utilize that as things to reinforce the learning and the engagements that you're having in these classes. So on that same similar wavelength, we also are part of a 5 College Consortium. This 5 College Consortium is made up of UMass, Amherst College, Mount Holyoke, and Smith College, and then, of course, Hampshire. And they're all within the same area. They're all within 20 minutes or less of each other, sometimes 25, depending on traffic. And they are easily accessible through a bus system that is really dependent on the student schedules and really made accessible so that you can get to class on time. And that's really to allow our students to access up to 6,000 course offerings and really just allow you to access as many different types of education that you might be interested in, so that you can feel fulfilled in what it is that you're interested in learning. So that's kind of Div 2 in a nutshell. You're getting your advisors to help you design what it is that you're supposed to be taking and what you're interested in taking. You're able to access the 5 College Consortium so that you can take classes that we might not be offering that semester, or a professor that you really want to work with who works at one of the 5 colleges. Something to also note is that students at Hampshire are allowed to take grad level courses for not an extra fee, and that's something I like to really point out, because our students are engaging with classes and coursework in a way that feels critical and feels like a dissertation, and we'll get into Div 3, which is even more similar to dissertation. We're asking you to learn the knowledge and then build on the knowledge. We're not just asking you to learn knowledge that already exists and repeat it back, but to learn that knowledge and then to build it somewhere else. Where does it go? Create new knowledge, discover, investigate, research. And that's very similar to the ways that master's programs work. Is here's all this knowledge you learned in undergrad, and where does it go next? What is it that you individually bring to bring that knowledge forth in a new light? So that's something to think about. You're allowed to take grad level courses and for not an extra fee. There's a lot again, so because we're short on time, I will say we'll have resources ready for you all so that you can get even more information about how the Five College Consortium works. But I'm going to go ahead and jump into Div 3 because it's pretty important. Bernadette, do you want to add anything to Div 2 before I jump? No? Great. Oh, there is one last thing. Just like Div 1, there is a CEL 2 requirement, and that instead of campus engaged learning, it's a community engaged learning. And that's really the only requirement besides making sure that you take the right amount of courses in your Div 2, and that again is community outreach. Sometimes it can be campus, it's just a higher level of your first one, and it's still 40 hours for the whole year. Again, not hard to complete. So at the end of Div 2, yep, go ahead.
I was going to actually dive into one thing because I got some new language this week that may not even have been on your newest slides, Kiara. But one of the things that our advisors are going to be working really closely with students is during Div 2 is to be asking questions that are satisfying a multicultural perspective, very similar to that multicultural perspective in CEL 1. We're really wanting you to take this now into the academic realm if it has not already. And so some of the things that we want you to be thinking about are what are non-Western perspectives? How is race handled in the United States or other countries? How are knowledge and power interactive with one another? And what happens when knowledge and power are not available to students? So that's really a key component to a lot of Hampshire's academic focus as well, is broadening the perspectives that, that our students are taking.
No, that's great. And I think that although that might be specified in Div 2, that's something that we really hope our students are kind of engaging with throughout their time at Hampshire, because that's important, is really challenging and questioning the knowledge that already exists, as maybe there's other ways to think about this and engage with it in multiple perspectives, and especially different cultural perspectives. So that's great. And then to jump in, so your Div 2, again, you're going to make a portfolio. It's going to have important pieces of work. It's going to have your evals that you've written and that your professors have written. And you're also going to, again, write a retrospective, which is how all of those classes connect, what you've done over the year. You'll also have documentation of your CEL and any other outside classroom learning, your study abroad. All of that is going to go right into that portfolio. Your advisors will say, yay, you've passed. And then you'll start your Div 3. So again, with the Div 3 process, you get to pick 2 advisors. Some people keep the 2 advisors they've had. Some people switch out the whole committee. Some people keep one and change the other. It's really up to what is going to best fit for you. And then after that, again, similarly to the Div 2 contract, it's a little bit different because it's a little bit more centered around questions and where you're headed, on a less about what classes you're going to take, but more about what is the knowledge you're going to research and how. You're going to write a Div 3 contract. And your Div 3 contract, again, is really specified around questions that are interesting to you and how you're kind of looking to get those answers, or just spend an exorbitant amount of time in those questions and in that research. The great thing about Div 3 is that it looks different to many different people. And when I say research, I use it as a broad term from my Hampshire experience, that research can mean for one person spending 2 hours a week in the dance studio making movement that is related to the research that they're doing, and that's a type of research. For some, it's being in a lab and actually doing quantitative research on cellular data. And for some, it's reading up on laws and policy and creating new structures of like political structures in a utopian society, right? So there's all these different ways to engage with research. And then again, the great thing about Div 3 is, while this is happening, you are going to get together with other Div 3. So you have 2 requirements during your Div 3. And so majority of your time is spent engaging in that research. And then your other 2 requirements are 2 advanced learning activities. And that can be Div 3 seminar. It can be a grad level course. It can be a TA-ship. Sometimes advisors let it be an independent study if it's at a higher caliber. And the great thing about that is it's allowing you to engage with other people who are also in a similar process or at a higher level, and it should always feed the Div 3 that you're interested in. So those are the two requirements, and then the rest of your time is spent in your project, like I said, and that should equate to 6 to 8 course hours of work. So it's a lot of feels like a lot of unstructured, but you're meeting with your advisors weekly. You are setting yourself up. You're making your deadlines. You're creating the curriculum that you're following, and it's all based on questions. Some Div 3s that I think are really fruitful and really interesting to think about, because then they actually were a catalyst for the real world after graduation, was I know one Div 3 student was really interested in animation and was really interested in fish and made a fish animation Div 3 and actually was hired by Disney and Pixar and actually created Dory from Finding Nemo, which is incredible. We had one student who was interested in dairy, and actually their Div 3 was the catalyst for starting Stonyfield Yogurt. I don't know if you know that. It's a local company, but they do a lot of great yogurt products. Bernadette, do you have any Div 3s that were really inspirational for you that you want to add?
Well, there's a lot of them actually, but I would say one of my favorites is a student who went to El Salvador, was actually studying something completely different, realized that there was not good medical care up in the hills, in the sense of people were actually getting examinations on the floor because there was no way to bring an exam table up into that area, and most of the families were actually sleeping on straw mats kind of thing on the floor. And so when that student came back to campus, they worked with an engineering student and developed a table that could collapse into a backpack, and it could be hiked up into mountainous areas. But most importantly, they used bicycle parts, because bicycle parts are the most accessible opportunity in emerging countries. So in doing that, they were able to create an absolutely brand new product that they then open sourced so that anybody could make this, any medical professional who was working in rural areas that didn't have access to roads or cars could actually put this new table on their back and hike it up, so that people could be up off the dirt and have much cleaner exams and make it more accessible for everybody.
Right. Yeah, and that's just great, because it just really speaks to how at Hampshire, no matter what you're studying, there's always this part of innovation and really trying to create something. I think that there's another unspoken requirement of the Div 3 process, which is it's not just about discovering and creating new knowledge, but then it's how is it accessible? How do we share that knowledge? Because knowledge doesn't get us anywhere if nobody knows about it, right? So it could be presenting, it could be making a video, it could be just sharing it amongst close friends, because it's an intimate, trauma-filled experience that you've learned from. And so there's just all these great things. Comic books, it's really tapping into that creative mind of Hampshire, of that there are many different ways to get to one place. So how do we test all those different ways? And each student does it a very different way. Something I do like to touch on is some statistics of Hampshire, just because I know some people find it really fruitful to think of it this way. But here are some things that even with narrative evals, there are ways to be successful after Hampshire, and for grad schools especially, they find it fruitful to see how you engage with those classes with the transcripts that we provide, because you're not just seeing a letter or a number, you're seeing their thinking process and who they are as a student. And that's what grad schools really like, because they want to know how you're going to engage with the knowledge that they're going to share with you. So some things to know. 65% of alum get an advanced degree within 10 years of graduating Hampshire. 89% of students land in their preferred placement within 6 months, whether that's job, whether that's a nonprofit, whether that's in the higher education that they next want to complete. Something else is Hampshire's in the top 3% of colleges to send students onto a PhD. And I think that this is really incredible, because we are a really small school. We are an alternative school. And yet it just speaks to the way that our students are able to think critically, engage with things that in a vigorous way that like really sets them up to be successful in PhD programs and master's programs. And then lastly, this really ties into what we were just talking about the innovativeness and really being entrepreneurs of our education. 1 in 4 of our students start their own business or nonprofit. And I think that's because we're not just asking you to repeat back knowledge that already exists, but we actually ask you to build it into something else. And so there's this underlying entrepreneurship throughout all of your time at Hampshire, where you're starting to take ownership and really develop, how do I create? And then how do I document that process? How do I actually build? And that's really important. And I think that's why so many of our students, 25% of our students, build their own business or nonprofit. And I think those are some really good things to know about Hampshire students after Hampshire. I'm going to turn it back over to Bernadette in case we want to kind of wrap up and talk about maybe some admissions, financial aid things.
Perfect. I was exactly going to jump into that. So a couple of things to know about our application process. We have been test blind for at least 5 years now. We were one of the only schools for a long time that have been test blind. For those of you in your senior year now who were juniors last year, I'm so happy to hear so many other schools are going test optional or test blind this year. Use that to your advantage. If you're not a great test taker, think about those schools that are more test optional or test blind. If you are a great test taker and you want to submit those, we will never look at them, I'm sorry to say, but those test optional schools, that might be a good option for you because it gives you something else for them to look at. We are on Common App. It is no fee to no fee to apply to our school. We ask you to fill out both the federal financial aid, the FAFSA, as well as the CSS profile. That is how we give all students a merit award. So our merit awards run usually between $2,000 to $22,000, with the average actually being closer to $12,000 to $18,000. So a majority of students get in that approximate range of $12,000 to $18,000 as a scholarship, meaning no loan, you don't have to pay it back. We have only a few requirements from you. We ask for 2 letters of recommendation. I would say make your teacher one your most important one, because that one we know gets more at the heart of who you are. You're welcome to ask a parent to write a letter of recommendation as well. That's pretty rare, but we always think they are your best cheerleader. So we want to hear from them if they're interested. There is the required essay. I have to think about it because we just switched it. The required essay is the Common App essay. There is a supplemental essay from Hampshire you're welcome to do, but it is not required. We do offer interviews, and those are usually with students, although sometimes some of our counselors do them, but we want you to have the opportunity to talk to students, or both you interview them and they kind of interview you. And besides that, I am happy to take any questions and also to answer a couple of common questions. So please feel free to type in questions into the chat, but I am going to answer a couple of really common questions that we get. The first one is, what type of study abroads do we offer? So Hampshire has 10 study abroads that are Hampshire sponsored, but we can also have you work with our global education office to get into anything, any study abroad that is of interest to you, whether it's domestic or international. Our most common and beloved study abroad is a semester in Havana, Cuba. And we've been doing it for a long time. We even have alum that go at the beginning of the semester because they are so invested in this program as well. And every student that I've spoken to who has gone has loved it. I've watched videos about students being there. It is an incredible process, and I admit I'm a little jealous that I don't get to do it. Kiara, do you want to add anything about study abroads? Okay. I'm going to answer a couple of questions about our campus. So being asked what type of campus we have, it is generally a very rural campus. excuse me, we have 800 acres. We have a lot of open land. We have a working farm that you can work on. You can be part of an internship, or you can also get free vegetables, because we have a CSA, which is community supported agriculture, for all of our students. Additionally, our campus has a lot to offer when it comes to outdoor recreation. We have woods that many people have created trails that you can go and hang out. It's very beautiful. Walking trails. It's also actually used for field research within our science programs. We have a lot of outdoor recreational opportunities as well. We have a program called Outdoor Programs and Recreational Activities, if I get it right. The acronym is OPRA. And there is a climbing wall on campus. There are 2 gyms. You can rent equipment, whether it is camping equipment, kayaks, bicycles, any outdoor equipment for you. Really fun programming. They do a lot of weekend events that you can participate in. In addition, we have a couple of sports that are, a few sports that are competitive, but honestly, athletics are not our #1 thing at Hampshire. But Kiara could actually speak to a few things, because Kiara has participated in some sports. So Kiara, why don't you jump in on that one?
I have been on every sports team at Hampshire, so actually I can speak to it pretty well. And I used to be a really competitive player, especially for soccer. I played on men's varsity through high school since my freshman year, so I definitely was like, ooh, competition. So Hampshire's not super competitive in the sense that we don't put competition over being good sports, and we it's really about getting together and being with people who love the same sport you do and being good players. But I will say it's some of the best group bonding I've had, some of the best coaching and mentors that I've ever accessed in terms of sports. And it's really nice to be in a place where doing sports and being healthy are both equally important, that there's not this toxic relationship to sports, because so many people from Hampshire come and have quit because they've been burnt out or pushed by a coach too far, or they just like developed a relationship with sports that wasn't fun anymore. And Hampshire kind of brings that back of like, how can I be competitive, have fun, and be healthy, and get to know each other. And it's been really great. So we have a basketball team. We have a soccer team. We did for a while have an equestrian team that currently is being put on hold just with everything going on, and I think might be starting up again soon. We have a Frisbee team, and our Frisbee team is great. But primarily our biggest sports are soccer and basketball, because we're with the small Yankee conference and we travel, and again, our coaches are great. So.
Excellent, thanks. To hit some other questions, somebody has asked about the learning collaboratives. So I'm going to actually stop this screen share, and I'm going to bring up another screen. So just give me a second if I can. I'm going to share this one again, but hopefully be able to go back. No, sorry, let me try that once more. Not the screen I'm looking for.
While Bernadette is figuring that out, I just want to take a minute to plug in something we kind of skipped over during the admissions process. We do have a part on our application for portfolio submissions, and that's because we find it really important to look at you as not just what you study, but also all the other parts that make you great. So if you have photos that you've taken, a research paper you did a really great job on, poetry, or just anything that you think really speaks to you, videos from a dance performance, there is a place in our application process where you can submit those things so that we can look at you holistically as a person and not just the grades that you've gotten, which are also great indicators. But we also want to know like what other parts of you that you might not necessarily study academically, but still add to how you might contribute to Hampshire as a community member. So that's just something to keep in mind as well.
Thanks, Kiara. Excellent. I wanted to bring this up because this is our learning collaboratives. This is actually an incredibly new and innovative way of looking at academics. So when you look at most colleges, they have longstandingly used a system that all of us call schools, or all of them, because now we no longer do that. For a long time, we have been breaking down the barriers between schools. If you're at a pretty typical college, you might be in the economics department, but you're going to have a really difficult time getting into the arts or even taking classes in any other area, because they really section you off in your learning. And what we want to do is break that down, because there's no real world problems that are solved from only one perspective. So using this model, which is exactly what our Div 1 seminars I had spoken about earlier, how those Division 1 seminars are taught by multiple faculty. All of our classes are now put together in a way that they fit into one of these 4 categories. And by looking at either environments and change, in/justice or injustice and justice, media and technology, and time and narrative, it is asking you to ask questions from a really broad perspective. So to look at the environments and change, the idea behind it is to think about this as its broadest topic. How do we conceive of, interact with, and shape the physical, intellectual, and cultural spaces that we inhabit? So that's a really broad topic. That is a lot of questions all at once, but the idea is to look at something from every angle, because you can't solve, if we're just going to use the pandemics right now, we're not solving it only medically. There's an economic component, there is a social component, there is obviously a medical, physical component, but then there's also an environmental component. How is the environment itself interacting with the virus, and how are people interacting with the environment, which then changes the way the virus may act? And that goes across all of these different learning collaboratives, so that you can really begin to see that there are different lenses to be focusing on in different areas. And even if you are, say, considering the idea of a medical degree and you want to be thinking about something like pandemics from a medical perspective, it's really good to understand there's other people working on it in other ways, whether it's research in the drug industry, never mind just the, once the virus vaccine has been developed that you as a doctor may use, you sort of need to know what's happening behind the scenes. Why are certain things happening in our decision making at the political level, through policy and legislature? How is that going to affect the movement forward of getting a vaccine that's effective, or how are we handling the environment? So just using that as a really small example, these learning collaboratives are a very, very innovative way of approaching learning. And every single class on our college campus that we offer is in one way or another connected to one of these learning collaboratives. And the learning collaboratives, in addition to having just courses, they are also going to be offering workshops and seminars outside time, outside of class time, so that students have access to learning about a broader perspective than just what they're learning in their class for it. Kiara, do you want to add anything more? I don't want to go too far into it because I still want to give a little more time for any further questions.
Yeah, I don't have too much else on it, except for I'm really excited to see how these learning collaboratives take over the next year.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen so it doesn't feel too jarring when that happens. But some of the things that we also like to talk about are the much broader perspective of what we offer in the area. So Kiara had mentioned earlier about the Five College Consortium. In addition to the academics that they offer, there are so many cultural opportunities, whether it's, very school-sanctioned clubs or much more informal cultural opportunities within the area or even within the colleges. Having 5 colleges in less than 10 miles in a fairly rural area gives us an incredibly, an incredibly rich opportunity to share information, to share fun, to have times of social justice where we come together and really look at the world's problems, both informally and formally. Anything you want to add about Five College Consortium? I know that, Kiara, you had spent some time taking classes and interacting in the Five College Consortium.
Yeah, I think the one thing that is really clear that when I went to other national events or whatever and representing Hampshire, that we as the Five College are also a community. So we had one student who got to go to nationals for a horse event, and we just didn't have the funds to bus just her there. And so Mount Holyoke said, no worries, we'll take her. We have a whole group going. And so there's just this clear that we are the Pioneer Valley schools and we love each other. And so it's really nice to be in a broader community.
As Kiara had mentioned earlier, it does not cost anything extra to take classes at the Five College Consortium. Right now, because of the pandemic, it's only online for those classes, but that will go back to what our standard practice had been after we are all doing face-to-face classes again more consistently. Kiara, anything else that you want to touch upon while we still have a rapt audience, the attention of our audience?
Yeah, I think the one thing is that being a part of this event was really great just because we are a college that changes lives. And I think Hampshire changed my life, so I'm a little biased, but I really believe in its mission to really find new creative pathways for everyone to be an owner and expert of their own life and intelligence. So I think that it's constantly changing lives and constantly changing the world. So yeah.
Some things to know about: we do have a few scholarships that are available to students. We have a scholarship named for James Baldwin. James Baldwin did actually teach at Hampshire for a short time at the end of his career. And the James Baldwin Scholar, if you are a first generational student, if you have a low expected family contribution, which is a financial aid term, we can help you if you have any questions about it. But specifically students of color and those who are first generation, we have a really, really wonderful supportive program. So please let us know if there's any information you'd like about that, because it is a program I feel very, very supportive of, because of the students I've seen come through it have had opportunity that they might not have in other ways, and we really feel proud of that. Anything else, Kiara? All right. So if there are any questions, if there's anything anybody can think of later, please feel free to reach out to Kiara and I. We are on the website, hampshire.org, .edu. We were just doing something else that had a .org. Feel free to reach out. I cover the New York City area most often. I know most of you are from the Southwest, potentially. So even though that's not the area that I cover, I am very happy to help you. I've actually spent a lot of time in the Southwest, so I know that I feel like I can connect a little bit and help you understand the differences of your area versus ours, because New England is certainly about as opposite as you can get from the southwest part of the US. And I think that's it. Russ, I'm happy to bring you back in. There you are. We really tried to rush here so that we didn't go over. If anybody else has any questions for these last couple of minutes, you're welcome to write them into the chat, but I don't think we have any more right now.
I think we're good, and great job on the timing. So to both of you.
Thanks.
And I'm going to go ahead and share the screen for the people who did join us. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. When you close your window, a quick 4-question survey will appear, a very quick one. We appreciate any feedback you can give. to help us out. This is just one of many sessions being hosted, so be sure to sign up for additional ones where you signed up for this one. And in about a week, you'll be able to find this session's recording as well as all of the other session recordings if you'd like to come back and review that. Again, that's at the same place that you signed up for these sessions. Again, thank you to the representatives from Hampshire College, and thank you for attending this session. Have a great rest of your afternoon.